Hey everybody, and welcome back to the 10,000 Heroes Show. I'm your host, Ankur Shadilite. And I just recorded another interview. I kind of took a break for a few months, and then this week I'm just getting back into the flow. And this is a gentleman that I met, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. A new friend of mine. His name is Wolf. And I really had no idea what was going to come out of this. As I mentioned in the podcast, the first time we met, I noticed he had a t-shirt saying, "Ayahuasca saves lives," and one arm. And we started our conversation based on those two things. And it really became, this episode today, became a real meditation on the relationship between pain and purpose, death and joy. And it's he's had experiences I've never had, that most of you probably have not had, and are quite powerful. And I think if you have had some of those experiences, like the 24/7 nerve pain for years, then you'll feel seen and understood in this. So if you're listening to just the audio version of this, he starts out on video with a physical reference to his missing arm, and then it gets brought in verbally in a second, but just to give you that little heads up. And thank you, and enjoy the show.
It's kind of like we were doing this podcast, right? It's just I go with the flow all the time.
Yeah.
Because everything's not so cut and dry.
Yes.
It's the flow. The flow of life is what I've really learned to accept through all the challenges that it's thrown my way. This being the biggest one.
Yeah. So I'd like to get into that a little bit. So this podcast is generally about meaning and purpose. And it's about how people have found meaning and purpose in their life and how that relates them to the outside world. And I just, full disclosure for the audience, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. But when I met you randomly at a party, there were two things that really jumped out to me. One is you had one arm, and the second is you had a shirt that said "Ayahuasca saves lives."
Oh, that's yeah, that's sums it up.
Yeah, and so I don't know much beyond that, but knowing those two things, I'm guessing you're going to have some really interesting perspectives on the questions I ask. And the main question, really, and then we'll kind of depart from there, is what do you feel your sense of purpose is?
That's one I've been asking myself since my 20s, really, right? Is trying to find. I feel like when you have this certain way you look at life, your teenage years, you're starting to develop and get a sense for what you like or what things feel like or how it operates around you. And in your 20s, you start to feel out what brings me excitement, what fulfills me at the end of the day. You start going through these things, experimenting. And as I'm 35 as of November, and in your 30s so far, being in the middle of them, it feels like you really settle in and you start cutting the fat, so to speak, from your 20s. I don't need to smoke cigarettes anymore. I don't need to party. I don't want to feel shitty when I wake up. If I do party, you start feeling these things when it comes to partying. I like reading a book more than I like watching TV sometimes. You start finding that comfortable spot in your life. And as this accident took place, it really honed in on that question: what's the meaning of my life here? Like, what is my purpose?
And what's the relationship between this? Why did the accident? Why wasn't it just like, oh shit? Why did it have to do with meaning?
Probably because I've experienced some traumatic loss as a child too. I was really close with my mom's brother, my uncle, and he died when I was 11 from a motorcycle. He fell asleep at the wheel in Death Valley, of all places.
Oh man.
They were trying to transport the motorcycles and do it within like a 24 or 48 hour run so they could save more money. And he fell asleep because they were on their way back from the Bay Area to the Death Valley.
He was driving a motorcycle?
Yeah, they went down there. It was for Mac Tools. So for Mac Tools, they had this like thing that they needed these motorcycles for. And so they were dropping him off in Vegas and then trying to drive the other ones back to the Bay Area. And they were all trying to save money, so he'd try to do it and run instead of sleeping in a hotel.
Yeah.
And he fell asleep at the wheel and launched himself onto a rock, and that was it. It's crazy. I remember my mom waking up. Anyway, long story short, my mom got cancer when I was 13, right before I turned 13. I actually found it on Halloween. Her and my sister found the lump in her breast. And that was the beginning of the journey of figuring out life and my purpose really was when mom got cancer. Because I also grew up with her having scleroderma, which is a crippling disease that like tightens your skin over time, and only women get it.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, and most
Yeah.
people don't. It's very rare. It's just in women.
Hmm.
My sister got it. Stanford did a study on her. So I grew up with my mom being in constant pain too, and drug abuse and alcoholism.
To
So
to
that's all part of it,
to,
really.
to like to get at the pain, or was that before?
Does before.
Yeah.
But then when the pain started happening, because she got sick, so a year after I was born, I also have a sister that's 5 years older than me, and she went through some traumatic stuff with my mom before I was born, and I'm a half sister, my sister's half sibling. So my mom found my dad, they got married, had me, and then a year after that, she got scleroderma, and my dad got diabetes. So I grew up with this family having these like illnesses and seeing that. And when she got cancer, she started smoking weed with me. I was only 13. And so that was a whole nother introspective phase of my life. Seeing my mom struggle, seeing cannabis bring relief to her from the meds and giving her energy and letting her eat food. And then she'd interact and laugh with me. And so she had this wonderful herb to help her counter all the stuff that she was going through. My dad didn't agree with it. That was a lot of fighting, um, but a lot of good times with me and my mom. Um, I hold a special spot in my heart for my dad because now that I'm older, I can really see some of his perspective more
Mm.
instead of holding it against him,
Mm.
because mom was so sick and dying. And at 15 years old, she died, which is actually 20 years, March 12th.
Oh
So
wow.
it's coming up here.
Yeah.
It's been 20 years. Um, so that's crazy. But that all ties into the accident because of those experiences, because of losing my favorite uncle, losing my mom. They became like my angels. Is what I kind of tried to find a silver lining in death, right? And that created this whole spectrum of life and death, introspective, outrospective. Like I started looking at everything in a way related to death and life as a young kid, and then psychedelics, and that really launched me into how big this world is and how much beauty and meaning there is in everything, from the blade of grass that we walk on to the water that runs through every pipe in our house. There's all these things that are so important that we just are so comfortable with these days.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
And so that's been a big thing throughout these things is when you look in a microscope, right, and you see the little things all interacting with each other, depending on what you're looking at, and then you come back out and you're in the break room and you see everyone at the table. It's like everything is the same in this sense of you keep going out. It keeps looking that way.
Yeah.
Just like our galaxy or our solar system is a small version, and you just keep going out and it all kind of keeps looking the same, and then you go in closer and we're the same. We're one, but we're separate. So it just started all this kind of like that's what the psychedelics and death and life and like what this purpose is. And after the accident, my motorcycle accident, for the people listening, I was hit August 2022, and I don't remember the accident. I just woke up in the hospital after 2 surgeries, like a couple, but basically they put my arm back together because it was broken in both spots.
So you don't remember any like what hit you, what direction? There's
Mm-mm.
no.
There's a video of it
Oh.
from a restaurant. They had the camera outside, so they captured the accident. But this is in my hometown where I grew up, Alameda, California, and it's a little small town next to Oakland. And it's just interesting because I was born and raised on this island. I almost died there, and that was a weird thing. But the only thing I remember is putting the gloves on my gloves on and starting my motorcycle and letting it warm up, and that's all. The last thing I remember.
It's almost like a story from childhood where you don't have your own memory, but you can watch the video and feel like you were
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. It is very much like that. Actually, it's now that you say that's exactly what it felt like. It was super weird, almost like a movie, because it was just in the hospital and there's a video and you can, but you don't remember it. It is a very weird, odd feeling.
So you got hit.
So I got hit. A person ran the light. They tried to make the intersection cut and they didn't. So I was in front of them and launched me 77 feet through the air.
77?
Yeah. My motorcycle blew up instantly and went to the left and just crashed. Blew up in the street. I went flying and did a roll through the air and landed. I had my gear on and broke my arm in both places. And broke my femur right here, compound fracture.
So landed on your right side?
Yeah, well, it went like this. So as soon as I hit, my right side impacted the car, and then somersaulted me through the air.
Oh, okay.
And tore my artery in my neck, tore the nerve out of my C2 spine section, which connects to the brachial plexus here. So that's what controls the whole area of your arm and your chest right here. And so when the nerve tore out of the spine, that just deactivated. So a complete loss of function and feeling and everything here. And that's what happened. I woke up and they had replaced. Well, first of all, they cut my chest completely open when I got there because the artery was torn. So they sawed my collarbone open too, and then they closed the artery here. Started emergency blood transfusion, saved my life. They said I was 2 minutes away from bleeding out. Like another minute in traffic and I would have been dead. To get to the hospital in Oakland, which they deal with a lot of trauma because it's Oakland, so they're really good there. So they saved my life, put me back together. Then they wanted to save the arm, so one of the doctors wanted to amputate it, the other one wanted to save it. A UCSF got involved. It's a big hospital, college, and so I woke up and I look down and I see it and I go, oh man, something really bad happened. I'm in the hospital, right?
Yeah.
And then I just remember thinking, I have two choices right now. I have a choice where I can be like, what the happened? And I'm angry. Or I can choose that I'm really grateful to be alive and be in this hospital. And I remember thinking for a split second too, whatever happened, because at this point I don't know, right? So I'm like, if it's my fault, I don't want to hold on to grief and sadness and guilt and anger at myself. And if it happened to someone else and they were the cause of the accident, I don't want to hold on to the same feelings, anger and hatred and live that way. So I really just started to be happy.
So
Plus I was on
had,
some drugs.
you had this immediate understanding that holding on to that guilt or anger or blame wasn't going to feel good for you, or like what are the what's the ecosystem around that thought? Because it's a pretty powerful thought.
Mm-hmm.
But like, how did it? What was it associated with in your mind?
I mean, it's hard to say exactly, but also because of my extensive psychedelic use, I'm very familiar with drugs. My brain is wired very intricately with them, with tolerance and just. I don't know if that had to do with something being on fentanyl and ketamine when I woke up in the hospital. So I was already feeling very good. Like most people do when they have major surgeries or almost die, you wake up and you're high, right?
I didn't know that, but
I'd probably guesstimate at least 90 to 99, maybe even 100% of the time if you're almost dead because you have to be put under and put all these drugs in you. It just depends how your body reacts too. So I woke up and I felt pretty good considering that because I'm pretty
right,
pretty stoned
okay,
here.
all right. So this is like,
And
I would think you'd be in total like shock and screaming and crying, but right, you're full of these drugs that are supposed to prevent you from doing that
right,
and keep you alive.
yeah, and settle you down,
Yeah,
right, and take the pain away.
yeah.
So I felt great. So I woke up, and I think that has a lot to do with it, and being in a really nice place in your head, and not feeling that pain right away. Now, that notion that I got right away when I woke up of like, you have choice here to be angry or to be sad, or to be happy or angry. You choose one. That was quick. That didn't really take much time to think about. Excuse me. I also, because my mom was sick growing up, I spent a lot of time in the hospitals in Kaiser, and I had my own little health asthma from this other thing, and they burned medical waste next to Oakland, in Oakland, and it came over in Alameda and got a bunch of people sick.
Oh,
So I've grown up around this field of medicine and hospitals and just understanding a lot how it works. My mom was a nurse for podiatry, so I also had that familiarization with hospitals and nurses, and my aunt was a nurse. Um, so I have this general respect and love for people who take care of others. And so being in the hospital wasn't scary. So I woke up and I saw it, and I was, well, shit, I'm really happy I'm alive. And that was just the beginning of having all my friends come in as I woke up, and my family and whoever was there, Lucy, come visit me in the hospital, and all just super grateful I was alive. And um, that was another beginning process of really just finding out the deepest part of your character, the deepest part of who you are, was almost dying, and then being so grateful for another chance to live, and knowing I won't waste the time that I feel like I've wasted. And it's not wasted time, but I want to help people. I want to share this story, and hear other people's stories, and relate, and grow and prosper together, and bring our communities tighter, and our world community together more. And it's just given that second chance, it's like that's what the purpose of my life is, and that started that big deep search for, now that I have this second chance at life, and you feel like this purpose is there, let's hone in on that and get very precise on what you're going to do with your second chance at life to help people, right? How do you make your life better too? By helping others, you know that's what it seems. And that the last 2 years, or what, it's been a year and a half now, has been a deep deep search in what provides me with happiness, and what provides the community with happiness. and and then the flip side is death. Death and life and happiness and anger, and these are all emotions and feelings that we have to deal with. It's having the hard conversation, right?
to me, it just seems the specter of death. It just seems so important for this whole thing, in that we're always taking so much for granted. I mean, there's like the first world taking things for granted thing, and then there's just more and more levels of taking
Right.
things for granted. But ultimately, we're all either at every moment taking existence for granted, or intimately aware of death.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, in my mind, it's kind of this binary thing where at a given moment, I'm either not aware that I could be dying or dead, or I'm aware. And if I'm not aware, I'm just taking existence for granted. And if I'm aware, then I'm in this place you're talking about where it's like, well, fuck. If I'm here right now, some people would say there must be a reason. I generally think of it as like, I have this opportunity, or like I have this limited time voucher to make this as meaningful as possible, or to give this a reason.
So how are we not hard on ourselves, but give ourselves that ability to enjoy it too?
Yeah.
It's that dance,
Whew.
the dance of
Yeah,
life, just
totally.
back and forth of,
Yeah.
today I want to have fun, you um, but I want to. And a lot has to do with intention. Where's your intention go? Where do you focus your intention? And so it just shows you, the effect that you have on your water, or your food, or where do you place your intention? Like growing up, we'd do the prayer. I'm glad we're all together. We'd all hold hands and say that, and then sometimes people would have a different prayer that night, depending on who our family was eating with, or if it was just us. And I've brought that back even to Lucy and David. Like they do their prayers sometimes, and sometimes I like to say that, like, let's join hands, or hand in my case, and I'll hold Coco and Sequoia's hand with my one
Oh,
hand, and
yeah.
and it's just that little kind act, or that funny act, even of trying to hold both of their hands and making them smile, or seeing that, or they reach for my hand, they're like, oh no, grab it here, and then they laugh, and it's just like that simple act right there of joy, or that little burst of positivity can start going around that circle and make the difference in a meal. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Just by your intention of being present. So it's all these things about life and focusing your intention, and to focus your intention you want to be present in the moment, and when you're present in the moment you can enjoy the magic that happens in these moments more than thinking about the future. Or it's kind of like, I feel like what you're saying, right? Like how it's that dance of thinking about death, but then would you say just not thinking about that at all and being somewhere else in it?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it. I mean, entitlement is kind of, it's pejorative. You know, it's a little bit negative, but it's this idea that when if we're not intimately aware and present with the fact that we're going to die and we are dying and it could happen faster, then we're not actually tuned into the moment, because that's real.
Right, very real.
And I mean, you've had a number of experiences. It seems like that make it easier for you to remember that than most of us.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
But going back to the narrative structure, you wake up, you're feeling good from the medicines they give you. You have this decision. You're like, okay, I can focus on anger and blame and guilt, depending on who did this, or I could not. Your arm is in this destroyed state. UCSF gets involved. What happened after that?
They did some MRIs, a bunch of tests, the nerve tests, and they put electricity in your nerves and see which ones are firing and which ones aren't. And they detected the one next to my neck wasn't. Um, that told them what they saw in the MRI was correct, that the nerve was torn completely separated so that this wasn't activated. So the next step would be seeing how much nerve is left to work with and reattaching that nerve together, um, and saving the arm, and hoping that everything starts to activate. But that wasn't the case. So amputation was the next
So they
option.
tried to save it, and they were like,
This isn't going to work.
yeah.
We're not going to do surgery on you because that nerve is so separated that there's no bringing it back into that spinal column. Like, it's just too much of a surgery. The other options are installing electrical device by drilling holes into my brain, or into my skull, and then putting electrical wires into the area of the brain where it sends the pain signal, because I'm in constant nerve pain. So I had the pain after the hospital. That's when the pains, I mean, they start weaning you off the drugs from ICU. So you spend a week in ICU roughly, depending on the person and their resilience. I bounced back pretty quick. I was already standing to go to the bathroom within a day. And so I was able to get out of ICU in a week and get out of the hospital after about 3 to 4 weeks. And that's where the real journey of pain starts. And just like the rehab, trying to start walking again. Starting because my knee was, luckily my knee was almost
Yeah, because your arm
perfect.
wasn't the only part of you that was affected by
Right,
this
right.
accident.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So I had to learn how to walk with my right leg again, and do everything. I couldn't even bend it really for the first month. And so that's all these things together. And bless all of my friends and family who helped. That was, and I've turned it into a funny experience, like having your best friend sit there and hold your penis while you're in the tub or something, and make jokes and try and because it's a harsh, dark situation for a lot of people when they come and visit. I don't want them to, because that's what a lot of my friends would do. They'd be like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're alive," and I'd be like, "Me too," and I just make a joke. Let's not sit in this dark emotion.
Mm.
I think it's important to feel it. I'm very very much so on feeling darkness and being in it. But sorry, I'm jumping around.
It's fun.
It's yeah. So we'll just go back to that. So the process of healing took almost a whole year before they amputated the arm. So August 2022 was the accident. July 13th, 2023 was the amputation of the
Yeah.
arm. With all the things in between, I'd have to lug the arm around. So I had a sling, or I had a pouch that would sit on my waist with a box right here to hold my arm in its socket. Because the activation muscles weren't working, the arm was completely dead, so it didn't activate it into the socket. So my arm would hang out of its socket, and then I'd wake up and move, and the arm would slice, put back into the socket, and it would go in and out of the socket all day. And that was really torturous. That was a lot of pain. And the feeling of your arm going in and out of its socket in your shoulder, that was brutal. Um, Again, growing up with drugs, growing up with them in my family around me, my dad never did them, but my mom was familiar with them. Um, and she told me about her experiences when she was in those hippie phases and in these parts of her life where she used it. So I was very informed about certain drugs and how they work. And that was part of the process that helped me mentally, emotionally, and physically get through all this pain, was using certain substances and listening to my body and being like, I'm not going to sit here and get hooked on Oxycontin because I've seen what it does to people, and I know it's not really going to help this type of pain because this is nerve pain. What is what I suffer from mostly. Um, so I, so my arm was there for almost a year, and that whole time the arm feels like it's being electrocuted in the hand, like the palm feels like it's getting electrocuted to the tips of my fingers, and it feels like it's kind of crunched up like this right now, sitting next to me. So it feels like my right hand's like right
Wait,
here, like
now?
this. Yeah. So it's never gone away since the day of the accident. It's never gone away. That was the day that pain started happening because the nerve separated. So there's like an error message coming from the nerve in my spine, and it can't communicate here. And so it keeps sending the message to my brain going, there's a big problem over here.
Oh.
And because that problem is separation of the nerve, that causes pain signals to be sent from the arm that doesn't exist anymore into this patch, and then it can't be relayed to the brain. So they can't fix it, as far as I'm concerned. Or as far as I know, I should say. As far as I'm concerned, I think there is some way to get this fixed.
Okay, and the theory you're operating with is that the nerve knows it's no longer connected, and so it's sending these error messages, and that error message is the pain.
And that gets blocked up because there's no way to communicate that error message back to the hand because that nerve can't communicate to itself. I think that's the correct assumption that I'm under from the doctors and from everyone I've talked to.
Okay.
No, I've read Doctor.
God, I was really hoping that
That
when,
wasn't in pain.
well, yeah, and then I was hoping that, like in my like little fairy tale version of this, you're like, oh no, I don't want to amputate my arm, and then you walk around with this like dead weight arm for a year, and you're like, dude, fuck this, I can't wait till this leaves,
100%.
and then you're like, God, I'm gonna be just free when this leaves, and then they cut it off, and then you're free.
It was worse for the 2 weeks after they cut it off. Oh man, I mean the hospital stay at UCSF was one of the craziest, worst experiences I've ever had in my life. I but yeah, that's part of that journey too. All this has just been a wild journey because lugging that arm around and getting to the point where I figured it wasn't going to be saved. It's like because they told you and you had that feeling in the back of your head, but you're trying to be optimistic for the
Totally,
opportunity
of
for it to
course.
change.
Yes.
So it's this constant like, oh, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but like there is a dose of reality
Yeah.
where I'm probably not going to have my arm, but I can't think that way
Yeah.
because then I shut the option off of my arm coming back.
Yeah.
So it was this crazy like, and I even had like one of my best friends who I was on my way to his house to work out that night, and he rides motorcycles. He felt guilty for it, and so he wanted me to save my arm because he wanted me to have my life back. And I remember talking to him at one point and being like, yeah, I think I'm just ready to cut the arm off. He was like, no, don't do that. And I was almost like, do you know what I'm going through?
Yeah.
Like you don't. So why would you? And then there's another perspective because he feels so guilty that he wants to see me be saved. So he wants me to keep trying.
Yeah, because it'll
And
affect
I had
him.
to relate. Yeah, exactly.
It's
and
a
so
loss for him if you lose your arm.
and I stepped back for a minute and thought about that, and then talked to him more. And I was like, "Look, bro, I just want you to know I don't hold any of these things against you, and like I want you to know that it's time to cut this off to make my life better. So I need you to be there for me in that way, and we'll figure this all out." And we had a cry together and let him know, like, it's okay, brother. This is meant to happen. That was the other thing I didn't say. When I woke up in the hospital, the first thing I said to everyone, not the first thing, there's a funny story I won't tell right now, but the first thing I said to everyone as they started coming into the room and seeing me is, this is okay. I want everyone to be relaxed and know this was meant to happen. So that was a big, big moment of part of that choosing between being angry or happy about being alive is this felt like it was meant to happen. And it could be some of the ketamine working itself through my system at that moment, and it could have just been the fact that I almost died. And it does feel more like it's the almost death part, right? The near death experience. Was meant to happen in this fucked up way. I felt like I was meant to go through this pain and this struggle. And so that kind of ties into the whole process of getting the arm taken off of and seeing myself in a different light and seeing one of my friend Harmony said, you realize now that you're like this, everywhere you go you kind of activate people by showing them, like when we see someone who's disabled or something, it kind of hits you a little different sometimes. For I feel like for most of me and my friends.
Yeah.
um
And you notice it immediately.
yeah, and it makes you kind of grateful.
Yeah.
Oh wow, like life could be harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It could always be harder. It could always be worse. I remember meeting someone too when I was a kid and or a teenager, and I had lost my mom, and they had lost both their parents in a car accident. And it's like, see, it could be worse. I have a father and a sister still. So it's the practice of gratitude. Constant practice of gratitude every single day since that accident has been what's really helped too. But just bouncing all over the place, that
Well, I want to go back to this. It was meant to happen.
mm,
I want to know, like in some ways, like on a grammatical level, it's hard. It's really hard for me to grasp that. Like it's passive voice, so it was meant to happen. If it was an active voice, X meant this to happen. Like who meant it to happen? What meant it to happen? And what does it mean for you that it was meant to happen versus if it was not meant to happen and it happened? Just that there's just like so much
yeah,
depth in that, in what that phrase must mean to you.
yeah, you're right. I never even thought of what it would be like if I found out it wasn't meant to happen. But I believe that's me choosing positivity. It's
Yeah.
just, I have the choice. We have that choice. I mean, we don't have those answers really either, right? Like applying that it was meant to happen is saying that maybe God put me there to have this accident. But I also look at it as how lucky I am to walk away, because most people die from this accident. Is what I
77 fucking feet.
Well, yeah, and I was
Yeah.
going probably like about 25, 30 miles per hour, and the car just putting itself directly in front of me, and the fact you're on a motorcycle, and the fact that your spine plays the role that it does, the fact that it only tore one nerve out, and it was that specific nerve, it felt very specific, like God had a play in it, like he flicked it and was like, you'll be fine, but we need to take your arm off. And this is the way we're going to do it with least amount of impact. You know what I mean? That's what's this wild thing for me, because I just I got so lucky in the fact that I can still walk, that I can still pee and poop on my own, that I can
Yeah.
still. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Because when you wake up in the hospital, you can't do much for the first, depending on how your severity of your accident. For me, the leg and the arm, I would have to roll over in bed and defecate on myself and have a nurse clean it up. And then after that experience goes away for the first, after the first week of ICU stuff, you get into your room and, oh, now I can get up and use the toilet with a nurse. And then it's a week after that you can get up and use the toilet on your own, and it's like you're becoming a baby.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
and through that process of being a grown baby, you really really have this love for life. And the simplest things bring you joy, because it's just like when you're sick
Yeah.
and you can't swallow and you're like, all I want is to enjoy a hot cup of tea.
Yeah.
And then that moment you get that tea, you're like, oh, how much I miss the simplest thing in life. And so it's that magnified by a lot, and then thrown at you every single day with constant reminders, because you're in pain. And the pain is, and watching my mom go through so much pain also felt like why it was meant to happen to me, because I had this perspective of watching my mother struggle through pain, and here it is, my spin of the wheel, and I'm dealt a blow that is 24/7 constant nerve pain. And I wish my mom was here to ask her so we could talk about pain. But now I get to talk with others about it and share those stories. And it starts tying in together there about these experiences that I brought up about my mom and pain and struggle and suffer. And she's an immigrant from Belgium. So she has this crazy story of her own. And I grew up hearing that. And so that's also part of it. Um, my dad's from Northern California. And he had a pretty nice life, nice upbringing, to be a loving, good father and make this perfect little thing. And that's why it just feels like it was all meant to happen, to have this perspective, to have these experiences, to lead to this point when I went through this thing and almost died. And now, because of those experiences as a younger child and my mom and father and sister, I'm able to wrap that into mine and just appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a deep meditation on pain. Like you're in 24/7 pain, you know.
I wake up, it's constantly there.
Are you on some kind of drugs?
Well, I was using ketamine
Hmm.
for the last 2 years on and off because it's the way the drug is structured. It can be addictive, but it's not anywhere nearly as addictive as Oxycontin or opiates of any choice. And that's what the doctors give you when you have some type of pain. And they don't really understand nerve pain as well as we think we do right now. Like if you have a problem,
No
you go
one
to the
probably
doctors.
understands it like the way you understand it.
Yeah,
Just from the experience, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's definitely people out there that have similar or same or worse probably than me. I don't know, but I guess that I mean imagine that I know there's tons of people that suffer from nerve pain. I've gotten my sciatic nerve pinch before from standing too long at work, and I had coworkers that had that. And we had a yoga teacher where we was a cannabis club that we worked at in Oakland. And the yoga teacher that did class there started teaching all of us that were selling the cannabis at the bar all day to stretch your leg in a certain way, do the pigeon stretch to
Mm.
stretch out that muscle because you're pinching the nerve. So I knew what nerve pain felt like, but when you have it like a pinched nerve, it's much different than a torn one. And yeah, it's just a constant battle of pain management and quality of life. And those two go hand in hand.
But what's the
No
gift?
pun intended.
What? I missed that one.
Yeah.
But what's the gift? Like, if this is meant to be the 24/7 pain, what is it?
Oh, I feel like I'm one of the happiest people in the world. I mean, that's the craziest part, right? Is I'm in pain every day, 24/7, unless I'm on a high amount of psychedelics, and that's where ketamine came in to cross back to that.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that took the pain away for a decent amount of time. And when I say
Yeah.
decent, I'm talking 45 minutes to an hour,
Wow.
and that's it. And then you start coming back, and right away your arm starts electrocuting you in that pain again. And you're like, oh, well, we're back. And then if you want to go out again, it's another psychedelic journey, and it's a high dose of a drug that can be hard on your system. So that's been part of my struggle too, is finding a balance between using this tranquilizer slash psychedelic slash dissociate. And that's the part, it dissociates you from your body, from your physical body. So you literally astral project. And that's where I put on my eye mask and play music, like classical or meditation, all sorts of beautiful music. And while you're dissociating from your physical pain body, you become an astral body. And that's where I've found the most beautiful, serene, peaceful experiences of my entire life. I mean, I've taken some insanely high doses of ketamine to where the doctors at UCSF, tying back into that story when I got there, I was like, I don't think you guys understand my chemistry, and so I need you to work with me and give me a high dose of this drug. And they're like, well, we're maxing you out right now. At this is the hospital limit. And I was frustrated. Once my arm got cut off, I was even more pain, and I started getting upset. But I knew that the hospital system, you have to kind of talk to them in a certain way. Like, you get angry and you raise your voice, and as
Yeah.
soon as you get to the voice that's raised, and you're like, look, I'm really pissed. But I'm not going to yell at you, and I'm not going to treat you guys like shit. But I want you to know I will do that if you don't listen to me right now, right here, while I'm frustrated, while I'm in pain. I need you to work with me. And I eventually got them to go beyond the limit. They had the head doctor come down, the head pain specialist come down. I mean, I had like 10 doctors from the top of UCSF in here talking to me, and finally they gave me a high dose of ketamine. And it helped with the pain here and there. But it was at just some point, they've thrown so much at my stomach, they've thrown so much opiates that my system was just completely overloaded. I was in more pain in my stomach than I was in my nerve in my arm at one point, because there was so much drugs and shit going on in my
Jeez.
system, and all I wanted was the ketamine. But they said they knew best, and so that was this whole experience. I had to pull myself out of the hospital because they were just, the food isn't as good. They're giving you all these meds to try and combat your stomach from hurting from all the opiates that they're giving you. And I was just like, but you guys want to keep me here 3 more days and keep me on this regimen of these pills? All I want is kefir and ketamine. It's like, so eventually I pulled myself out, and I learned that this is going to be probably the rest of my journey until I get somewhere where technology is able to help me, or I have some other type of experience with something that will help cure this. I don't want to say cure, but help fix this pain signal, whatever's going on. They talked about doing a magnetic thing too, where they put magnets around the area of your brain that produces the pain. But again, I don't like these invasive or weird things that it's just not familiar enough with to do. You're not going to drill holes in my head and stick electrical wires in there to stop the pain.
That's saying a lot, for someone who's in constant pain, not to do some weird shit.
Yeah,
It
well,
seems like many
I
people.
just don't trust that parts of some of these
Yeah,
medical systems, and I don't think we know enough yet. I mean, clearly we don't know enough if
yeah.
we're doing stuff like.
I guess what I'm saying is that most people who are experiencing the sensations you're experiencing, it seems to me like I'm just imagining myself. I would be very desperate. And I'd be like, dude, stick some like alien shit back. Like I don't care. Just
Right,
like try something.
right, right.
But you're
I don't want to get damaged more,
yeah,
and I've seen that happen to people,
yeah.
and that's what makes me stop. Speaking of like the ketamine, I've gotten off it recently because it is harsh on your system, and any drug, I think everything in moderation is what I believe too, even moderation. That's what I've lived by since my 20s. Right? There's a time and a place,
Yeah.
and you gotta allow yourself to enjoy, or you gotta allow yourself to feel, which is pain or whatever it is.
I'm gonna change the direction here a little bit. I
Well, that's all
in general I'm like a very hopeful person. But I've been going through it recently, just feeling the pain, pain, loss, uncertainty, stuff in my
collective.
own life, and then like the global
Mm-hmm.
conflict. And I just wondered, given your experiences, if you think that humanity as a whole, like all of our homies, the whole species, has a potential to have a net positive effect on the other species and just types of things, like you might say like beings or presences like mountains or trees or rivers, just other things going on in the biosphere? Or is the best we can do to just not screw things up?
So I'm a big component of cold plunging, and I play classical when I do it.
Oh yeah.
And I had this experience this other night on ketamine where I went out, and it was probably like 12 o'clock at night, and I jumped into my cold plunge, and I couldn't hear a thing on the farm. And I had just watched a video about this guy. He's a sound guy, and he took birds chirping and he slowed that bird chirp down to like whatever the cut of the noise was supposed to be, and it sounded just like a whale call. So he took the whale call and sped the whale call up,
Yeah.
the noise of the whale that was making, and that sounded like a bird chirp.
Yeah.
And so I had this idea, and I'm just sitting out there, and I go, I wonder if I make a whale call right now, that a bird will hear that. And I'm talking, it was so quiet out there on the farm, and it was so foggy, so it was this really weird moment, and I made the perfect whale noise. like this out loud, and all of a sudden I heard a bird chirp, and I could tell they were so far away. And I made the noise again, this big whale call. Again, I'm high, I'm in my cold plunge, it's 12 o'clock at night, I'm having a great time. And I'm really feeling that vibe. And the birds start chirping and singing and coming towards me. And I can hear them getting closer and closer before I go inside. And I made like some bird chirp noises, and they kind of relaxed a little bit. And I could tell there was some type of communication that I didn't even know what I was saying was happening though. And so I've had other experiences on these wavelengths, but that's one of the ones most recently that really hit home for that ability to connect with animals and plants. And we have this, you know, built into us. It's just about trusting it, and and allowing your inner child to be present. That's something I want to talk about too, because that's part of what I see a lot of when I look around. Is I see these people who are so caught up in their life that they forget that their inner child's still there, and to be in touch with that. And you see it when you're around kids, right? Because they're still a child, and the way they interact with life, like your daughter's one of them. I see her at these parties, and she's just this beam of light. And I think it's so beautiful to see these kids carry that,
Yeah.
and it reminds you that you have that. And so I think, don't be so serious, right? Allow yourself to be a child and be in a cold plunge at 12 o'clock and make a whale noise and not be like, oh, is someone going to hear me?
Yeah.
Who cares? Make the noise, make the face, have the fart if you want. Have that like moment of being a child again, and that really brings you back into this beautiful rhythm. And I don't know exactly how that was tying into all that, but it, I think the inner child play and the animals, there's a lot to be said there.
Yeah.
Because if you're too serious as an adult, you're going to see that animal as something that might not be. And again, it's perspective. And it gets again back to the rabbit hole of energy and work and exchange. It's all pretty wild depending on how far you go. But that quantum field interacts with your energy, and that quantum field, like I can think of one of my best friends and they'll probably text me in an hour or something just because I have that deep connection with them, like Lucy. I feel what Lucy feels sometimes. And or I'll just think something. I'll think of like, oh man, like this is probably happy, and she'll literally text me or call me within a certain time frame expressing that exact notion. And I'm like, whoa. And it's happened so much with me and Lucy as being a prime example that now I don't even question it. And I just know it's our connection. We're like this crazy soul sister brother,
Yeah.
that we have. And that's been confirmed through someone who talks to the field and these things. And so it gets trippy because you're like, how far do you want to go down this energy hole?
Yeah.
But we all come from that, is what we're told, right? We're all fractals of source. And that's because source wants to experience life. And so you fractal away to have your experience. And I fractal away to have my experience. And to tie that all into, I think, where we were starting at is, I think our souls choose these adventures. I think our soul, at some point, mine would have been, I want to be on the wildest ride there is at the amusement park. In fact, I want to try every ride out at the amusement park, and I want to choose which one's the wildest. And then once I find the wildest one, I think I want to go on that even deeper, or again. And I feel like that's what my soul was.
That's what you've been doing this
Yes,
whole time.
right. And I feel like that's where my purpose has really been found. Is my soul's purpose likes to experience everything. It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. I just want to know what that experience is like, so I can have a more complete view, almost like an architect or a grand architect. But more, and my role feels more of like an assistant to the grand architect. Like I'm here to oversee and make sure that his architectural plans kind of continually be implemented and fulfilled, is what my real soul's feeling of purpose feels like. It feels like I'm here to help that in many ways. And that's what I was talking to you earlier about, is like the podcast feeling and like not wanting to put myself out there. But then realizing that I have a very unique perspective growing up with a mother who treated me a certain way. One of the most impactful things my mom ever did or said to me was, real men cry, and I want you to know that you can cry and still be a man, and you don't have to worry about what other people think of you. You don't have to cry in front of them, but you can cry behind a closed door, and you can still be a beautiful, loving, kind man. Just because you cry doesn't mean you're a weak, sad man. It means you're in touch with your emotion. And that conversation was so helpful to me in the way that I pursued life after that. And I think that's a huge message that I've been sent for is to translate that for a lot of men and women, but they have more, network security for, and I don't want to make that assumption. We all have our own stuff and stories, but that world where they kind of take care of each other and they're feminine more, I want men to be more in touch with their feminine and their inner child. Just as I think we all need to be a little more in touch with our inner child and our feminine and masculine energy, depending on which side you feel imbalanced off. Because I feel like that's what this is an imbalance, right? And that, it ties back into what you were saying about, do you think we can net positive, or it's like, yes, I do, because I think it's just an imbalance. But it gets more difficult because you have to want to correct your imbalance.
Yeah.
And so that's where the kind of split happens is, do you choose to help yourself balance out more, or do you want to ignore it and go the other way? Because that's what we have. We have those two choices. And I think that's what we're seeing play out right now. Is between all sorts of different things, between politics, between world politics, between the simplest thing at the grocery store, Um, it's just, it also just plays itself out naturally, I feel like, too. I don't know if you're into astrology.
No.
It's like stuff, when you look at these things, it's like a blueprint for how your life could go if you choose to go that way, but you still have free will, so you can disrupt that path that it's kind of showing you what you could go. It's this dance of life. It's just, so I believe in a grain of salt with everything. I don't want to put all my eggs in that basket, but I fill a few more eggs in certain baskets,
Yeah.
It's shown itself to me and it's shown to work. So that's why I'm very positive on us getting through this.
So what is the
We have to go through the dark night of the souls first, though, and that's what we're in right now.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
I can relate to that. Yeah.
And it all hits us different depending on what your path, like what your, that's why I bring up astrology, because it seems to be every single person's born sometimes at the exact same time, like, and you can still be completely different.
Yeah.
And that's the point. Like, astrology's not every single person born at this exact time is the same. But I look at it as like a roulette, mechanical roulette system that whatever the higher powers created through that, it imprints who we kind of are. Like, if you look at it, but not to the fullest extent, you still have free will, and it still matters who you're raised by or where you're raised, right? So I think that's the beauty in all this is we each are given that experience to figure out how we're going to come together and fix these issues that are happening on the global scale. I mean, right here in town too,
100%. Thank you, Wolf.
Yeah, of course. Always my pleasure.
Maybe one last question.
As many as you want.
Yeah, I'm just a little curious, and I think that the community of listeners will be curious of what you're going to do next. Oh, and if there's any way we can help.
No, right on. Yeah. I am working on getting my own podcast up called The Photon Collective, which wraps into that whole idea of us being a collective, and a photon is energy, information, and light, which I believe that's what we are. So the Photon Collective will be coming out shortly. I've also might do some things with Don't Be Greedy and get that back up.
That's the clothing line.
That's the clothing line.
Yeah.
Eventually open up a store here in town or something. Right now it's just everything's in transition still. Other than that, a main goal of mine is figuring out a piece of property around here to create a healing ceremonial retreat center. And that's probably a little bit of ways away, but that is a huge goal of mine. To host psilocybin ceremony, ayahuasca ceremony, um, just yoga, just sitting with earth, sound healing, all those types of cold, hot plunge stuff, therapy, everything that I think helps with my pain and just being a happy person. Those are my passions. So I'm going to follow that. And there's also a channeler called Bashar. Follow your excitement. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow my excitement, which is the clothing, the podcast, the YouTube stuff with Lucy. And so if you see me out there, any of you, feel free to say hi and make a connection. That's what I love. I love making connections. I love meeting new people. So that's what I'm setting out to do, and going with that flow, whatever comes, and tackle it when it gets here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey everybody, just a little note as we wrap up the interview. I was so into what he did with those whale sounds, because I love dolphins and whales and everything like that, that I actually asked Wolf to come into my living room after the recording session, and I played some bass and he laid down some whale songs. So that's what I'm going to roll next. If you're not into that, this is some kind of whale trigger warning. You can stop now, but if you are, we're just going to finish with that little coda. All right, thanks. If you like this episode, you can join the 10,000 Heroes Club, our own community of purpose, by clicking the link below this video. You'll never miss an episode, you'll have opportunities to nominate the people I interview and the questions I explore.